Hi everyone, so let's go ahead and answer these questions. Once again, this is from the Picasso passage from the AAMC, passage number 1. Okay, so let's recap quickly the main idea of the entire passage. Was the main idea of the entire passage to tell you about how amazing Picasso is and he is such a genius? Was that the main idea? No, that was not the main idea because that is a very superficial understanding of the passage. It's actually going deeper than that. The passage is really using Picasso as an example to show you that the true genius artist is one that goes back and relies on childlike intuition in their artwork. Yes, he uses Picasso as an example, but that's not the central thesis of the passage. The passage is actually making commentary on what it means to be a genius artist. And so, with that being said, let's give these questions a shot. And so, this first question, according to the author, Picasso's artistic achievements were in large part the result of his. Okay, and so let's ask ourselves, what type of question is this? This is clearly a CMP question. And so once again, the main idea of the entire passage is that the reason why Picasso was such a genius was because initially when he was a child, he was an academic artist, and then he was able to become more childlike in his later years. And so if you look at the answer choice A, it's saying retention of effortless genius. That doesn't really make sense because he didn't retain that. He said that as a child, he would draw in a very academic way. And if you want, where does that say that? This is the line from the passage where it's saying that. And so we can cross out A. Then going on to B, rejection of the art movements of his time. Is it really saying anything about art movements at the time? Was that the main idea? No, that was not the main idea, so that's wrong. C, practice of making multiple revisions and amendments. Isn't that more of an academic art? If you're making multiple revisions and amendments, that is not childlike. That doesn't indicate being childlike. So we can cross C out, and that leaves us with D. Learning to work with apparent spontaneity. And so once again, that's more childlike because, childlike art is more spontaneous. And so that is what, the author is saying Picasso's artistic genius mostly is based on. And so that being said, that's why the answer for this question is D. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. The word nature is used in the sense of, what type of question is this? This is a CMP question. And so the strategy that we would use from our strategy guide is this one. Highlight contrast noted by authorities in passage or by authors. Questions are likely going to bring this to attention and see how much attention you were actually paying, and that's exactly what's happening here. They're asking you what the word nature is used, right? How the word nature is used. And so if we go look back in the passage, the author brings up Apollinaire, and basically what Apollinaire is saying that there are two kinds of artists. The unreflective virtuoso, who relies on nature, and the cerebral structurer, who relies on understanding. Mozart could serve as the prototype of the first and Beethoven as the second. So once again, what this person is saying is that, the second type of artist is Beethoven, and the first type of artist is Mozart. And the first type of artist is cerebral, and the second one is a virtuoso. And so what's happening in the passage is that Picasso is actually going from being the second type of artist to being the first type of artist. And this transformation is what the author is saying, what is so genius about Picasso. He is able to go from a more academic artist in his earlier years to a more intuitive artist, more childlike. And so, you highlight the two types of artists. That's very important because this question asked, what does it mean by nature? And if we understand this comparison, we'll see that nature is really talking about intuition, and being a virtuoso is about being intuitive and spontaneous and being more childlike. And so, with that being said, it'll point us to the right answer choice. A. Objects and scenes of the natural world. Is that what the author is talking about when he's talking about nature? No, this is very superficial. B. Elementary aesthetic principles. Also extremely superficial. C. Intuitive artistic mastery. We should keep this one because this is going more in line with the main idea being, you have to be more intuitive, more childlike, and that is a virtuoso artist, and the virtuoso artist, one who's relying on nature, right? And then D, uncontrolled creative impulses. This is a bit too extreme. It's almost a bit negative. And so saying that something is uncontrolled and it's, creative impulses, that's kind of putting it in a negative light. And the author does not believe that. And so we can say the correct answer is C. All right, so let's go ahead and try to answer this question. What is the author's response to the standard story about the origin of Picasso's genius? Once again, what type of question this is? This is a clear CMP question. And so basically, if you go back to the passage, you'll find a line where the author says, "My own conclusion is that Picasso's output during the first decade of his life was unusually skilled rather than frankly precocious, but that no word short of prodigy can describe him in his spectacular progress over the next several years." So that sentence literally has the answer to this question. That sentence says, rather than frankly precocious. Now, which answer choice is matching that? D, being a skeptic, and Picasso's earliest drawings are presumed to be not especially precocious. That is exactly what is said in the passage. So, we can say D looks pretty good. Now let's look at C. It is presented as applicable only to Picasso's earliest efforts. Once again, this is an extreme word only. Whenever you see this in the answer choices, be careful. Don't pick this answer unless you see it in the passage itself. Unless the author himself said, it is presented as only applicable to Picasso's earliest efforts, then you might have a shot at, picking this answer. But if the author himself didn't say the word only, don't pick the answer choice with such extreme words such as only, all, always. All right, let's go to B, neutral. It is mentioned only to introduce the discussion of Picasso's eventual virtuosity. Would, the author stay neutral to the standard story? No, the author actually has a pretty negative, tone towards the standard story. And then A, acceptance. Picasso's early drawings are described as unusually skilled and his progress as spectacular. Even though the author said that his earlier drawings were, very skilled and that of a prodigy, they are not what led to his progress as being an artist, because if you remember, Picasso actually went the other way. Instead of becoming a more academic artist, he became more of a virtuoso. And so to say that the author would accept the standard story would mean that you didn't really understand the main idea, or you didn't really understand what the standard story was about. And so D would be the right answer. All right, so now let's try to give this question a shot. The assertion that Picasso's early productions contain harbingers of his later art is not clearly consistent with the information about. And so what type of question is this? This is a RWT question, and this is a skill that we will be using to help us answer this question. For not questions, completely rephrase question simply and look for the one answer that meets this, not the three questions that do not meet this quality, as an efficient strategy. So instead of finding the proof for the other three answer choices being true and using process of elimination in this type of question, just try to find the one that is blatantly going against the main idea, because if you try to find proof for every single answer choice that you think is correct, and in order to eliminate that answer choice, it's going to take up too much of your time. And so I'm looking for the one answer that explains why it does not make sense for his young paintings to reflect on his old paintings. So basically, I rephrased this question in a simpler form. And Picasso himself said that his young paintings were academic and his older paintings were intuitive. And seeing the answer choices, we see that the answer choice that best aligns and answers the question is A, being the way Picasso described his first drawings. It's not consistent with the information in the passage because his earlier works were talked about how they're so academic, and his later art was a lot more intuitive and childlike. And so, it wouldn't be consistent to say that his academic work when he was a child is a clear indication of the work that he does later on, because it's actually quite the opposite. And so this answer choice is going against the main idea of the entire passage. Thus, this is the correct answer in this not question. And all these other answer choices are not truly handling what's clearly going against the passage, even though you might not be able to find the evidence for them being true and might not be able to eliminate them. That's okay, because you know for 100% certainty that A is wrong. Okay, so which of the following innovative forms of art that are identified with Picasso most clearly exemplify his own implied goals? What kind of question is this? This is a RBT question. And what were Picasso's goals? Picasso's goals were to have a more childlike art. And so basically we have to look for an answer choice that indicates a childlike art. And so A, sculptures constructed of various surprising found objects. It's not a bad answer, so I will just keep this for now. And then moving on, blue period paintings with muted colors and elongated figures. Now, is that something that a child would draw, something with muted colors? Absolutely not, so we can cross this out. C, plates decorated with boldly colored, simply indicated faces. Yeah, this is definitely something a child would make, and so that was Picasso's goal, so I'll keep C. And then D, single-toned paintings with hard-edged, multifaceted perspectives. And so this is kind of in line with B, so we can cross this out because this is not childlike. And so between A and C, sculptures conducted on various surprising found objects. Because found objects is in quotation marks, it's indicating that it is some kind of sophisticated artwork, because you're making sculpture out of found objects. And so because it's indicating a certain type of selectivity and sophistication, because it's in quotation marks, we can say that a child will most likely not, make this type of artwork. So we can cross this answer out, leaving us with C, because that's more, indicative of what a child would make, and that was what Picasso's goal was. Okay, so which passage information provides the strongest reason to suppose Picasso had always been the artist of Apollinaire's first type? And so what type of question is this? This is a RWT question. Now, if you remember the first type of artist that Apollinaire indicated to, that type of artist, he said, was a virtuoso artist, a Mozart. And the second type of artist was more of a cerebral artist, a Beethoven type. And Picasso was actually more academic and Beethoven-like as a child, and then he later on his life became more of a Mozart type artist. And so with that being said, let's go through the answer choices. Picasso quipped that as a child he could draw as well as Raphael. That is not the first type of artist, that's the second type of artist, so we can cross this out. Picasso's early drawings indicate exuberant experimentation. That's being a virtuoso, and that's in line with the first type of artist, so I'll keep this one. C, Picasso wrote that in his youth he painted in a quite academic way. This is again going with the answer choice A, and that's the second type of artist, so this is not true. And then D, Picasso revised his portrait of Gertrude Stein from memory. That's also indicating academic and very, adult-like artwork, very Beethoven-like artwork, and so that is the second type of artist. So when you're talking about experimentation, you're indicating that it's more of a virtuoso type art, more of a Mozart type art, and thus the first type of artist, making B the correct answer. Alright, so this is the last question from this passage, and it's saying the author's characterization of Picasso's artistic aim suggests that the retort, "Don't worry, it will," meant that the painting. So what type of question is this? This is clearly a CMP question, and the strategy we will be using is this one. If a question is asking about something from end of a paragraph, don't only focus on the end of the paragraph. You have to see what the main idea of the entire paragraph is and how the last line is fitting into the context. And so if you want to look back, just reread the last paragraph where the line is found, and we can see that the entire point of this paragraph was that he wanted to paint more intuitively and not academically. And so this last quoted line, it could be confusing, but if you stick with the main idea of the paragraph, it will guide you to the correct answer. So A, was intended to portray Stein as she would probably look in old age. Nope, it doesn't really make sense. It's out of scope. B, would become a more accurate portrait of Picasso as Picasso continued to work on it. This is actually going against what Picasso wanted. He was not trying to make it more lifelike, more academic. C, was concerned with pictorial qualities rather other than a literal accurate likeness. This kind of makes sense because Picasso wasn't concerned about making it very much lifelike, very academic, so I'll keep C. And D, was an attempt to teach viewers to look at portraits in a more analytic way. If you are looking at things in a more analytic way, you're not truly relying on your intuition. And because you're not relying on your intuition, that's not really what Picasso was trying to get at. He was trying to look at, try to make you look at art in a more intuitive way. Thus, that's why he wanted to be a virtuoso, a more childlike artist. And so if you are being more analytic, you're not being intuitive. So that's not the point. So the answer choice we are left with is C.